Right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this second screencast podcast for green infrastructure and sustainable cities. This morning, I'm going to talk you through the things that we'll be doing in week two, where we'll be talking about perceptions. Now, this is maybe a slightly unusual lecture in terms of the series, as it's a little bit more abstract and not quite as coherent around the issues of planning or landscape as maybe some of the other lectures. But the reason that we have it is because, as we discussed last week in lecture one, that the context and the way in which we structure and understand the places that we live, work and see is very important to understanding what benefits or what principles that they're using. So within this lecture, what we will talk about extensively is the way in which culture, in which time, and in which experience shapes the way in which we look at the places around us, and therefore how we might decide to plan, design, or manage them. And just to give you a little bit of context and idea of some of the ideas, things we might be talking about, a couple of issues here. So can't really see because the screen's not very wide, but two images really. Both from children's books, one from Winnie the Pooh, so The 100 Acre Wood in Winnie the Pooh by A.E. Milne, and the other from a book called We're Going on a Bear Hunt by Rosen and Oxenbury. Now the reason I'm showing you these two images is one, that they're in my house, we see them a lot at home, but also they are fundamental to the way in which these two books are read and understood. So within Winnie the Pooh, the landscape and the 100 Acre Wood, the movement of Pooh and the other characters around the wood is fundamental to the story, and the woodland and the actual landscape is a character in the book. And because of that, the way in which the books are read is very much more interactive, and in much the same way that many Central European countries, Poland, Czech Republic, have a long history of engagement with woodlands and forest. This book has it's a quintessentially English interpretation of landscape, but without that understanding of the wood and the water and the different areas, such as where Rabbit lives, where Eeyore lives, where Christopher Robin's house is, the journeys and the movement and the experience of Pooh within those areas would be very different to if it was just in a different location. Now, the other picture, which is we're going on the bear hunt, is a story of a father and his children going to find a bear, and they find a bear in a cave. And when they find it, they get very scared. But on the journey to find it, they go through 6 different landscapes, including mud, a river, grass, and snow. And just from the way in which the book is written, they make the landscapes visceral and part of the experiences. And on the way to the cave to find the bear, the landscapes are exciting and they're adventurous. They're going through the mud, squelch, 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 and they're going through the river, splish, splash, splish, splash. But when on the way back, those things are deemed to be quite problematic or scary because they're running away. So they're being bogged down by the squelchy mud. They're being slowed down by the river, and the swishy swashy grass is making it more difficult to run away. And so within that book, especially, the landscape plays a key role in the journey of adventure, then the journey of adventure and finally safety back in their house. And again, the way in which we perceive the positives on the journey out and the negatives on the journey back is fundamental to how we might see that particular book. And just to bring it a bit more up to date, and I'm sorry that the images aren't great, but they are just taken off the internet. Piccadilly Gardens is the same. If we look at what might happen in Piccadilly Gardens, so the picture on the left there, that's what happened if they're going to take out the wall that currently cuts off the bus station from Piccadilly Gardens. And their aim is to make it a more inclusive and more functional place. They're also going to change the water fountain again and maybe move some of the paths around. Whereas the picture on the right shows the Piccadilly Gardens back in the 1950s and 1960s, where it was a formal garden with the rose beds, with the fountain, and they're very, very different images. But they also, if you look a bit deeper, you can see that there are issues about design and management that fit with the current era that we're working in. So the fact that there's a green roof on the cafes over in the garden, the picture of the left, that they're looking at integrating the design into the city centre and and rather than sort of cutting it off, is one way of perceiving that location as being more inclusive, of a better design and a better quality. Whereas the picture on the right, it seems to be a more formal structure and bounded space that you may or may not be able to get into. So there's hedges, there's fences, which are keeping the park away from the roads, which in many sense is a great idea, because it actually provides that sense of isolation and tranquility away from the main roads. But within this location, we can see a change in understanding of what is needed and what is wanted and what is valuable. And so in the same way that these landscapes here actually help to shape the story, the landscape here has changed over time as people have decided that different forms of investment, different forms of interactive space are more important. And that's something that we'll come talk about a lot on Thursday. So we'll talk about the dynamics of perception, that it's not static, that we are constantly learning and rethinking and changing the way that we think. That perceptions are socio-culturally appropriated, that they are based on who we are, where we're from, what we're doing, and that they are shaped by experiences, our emotions, and our interactions with certain events. And we'll talk about some of the ways in which I perceive places at the start of the lecture. But what it will go on to is to look at how this changing roles of perception influences the way in which we plan, we design, and we manage our green and open spaces. And that's an increasingly important aspect of this, because without that understanding of cultural and social needs and interactions, we don't necessarily know what we're doing is right. And that's something we touched on last week. So this has been a brief introduction to perceptions. We'll go through this into a lot more detail on Thursday. See you all on Thursday morning. Bye bye.